This is Interstate, Highly Deadly. This is a bonus episode, which is an episode from last year about a serial killer who traveled across the country killing. It has been remastered for sound. Enjoy. Today, we are going to be covering a really chilling case of a serial killer that was discovered and arrested in Reno. And I had never heard of this guy. Now, I will say I had heard the double initial serial killer, that moniker, and I had heard the moniker of the alphabet killer. I did not know those were one and the same, and I really didn't know what the story was behind that. And so now, after doing the research, I know that that is a man by the name of Joe Naso. Naso, you get it, Naso. So I'm going to take you back here. We're going to set the scene. So here we go. Think of a 91-year-old man. He's frail, wheelchair-bound, broken hip, and yet he's still strong-willed. Maybe I'll get out tomorrow. Maybe I'll be released. This is what he says from behind bars. This is Joseph Naso, the double initial serial killer, also called the alphabet killer, a former Marine, a freelance photographer, a husband, a father, and a predator. Now, I say former Marine, but there is conflicting information on the Marine situation. I've also read that he was former Air Force, and anybody who's been in the military knows the Air Force is drastically different from a Marine, but they were reputable news sources, but some listed him as a Marine, some said he was Air Force. His life was documented not only in photographs, but in his own chilling handwriting, diaries, calendars, journals, and the infamous list of 10. And if you don't know that that list of 10 is infamous, it's infamous for a reason. And in my opinion, his diaries, the calendars, the journals, extremely creepy and unsettling. What investigators discovered in those pages would reveal a lifetime of violence and obsession. Joseph was born on January 7th, 1934 in Rochester, New York. The family life, the neighbors described frequent and intense yelling from his home, which caused concern. An account relayed by fellow inmate William Nigero reported in Vanity Fair claims that a young Joe engaged in voyeuristic behavior, including peeping on his own mother. The same report alleges that when he was 9 or 10, his mother caught him trying on her lingerie. As punishment, she allegedly beat him with a belt and began calling him Miss Josie. In 1958, after serving in the Air Force or the Marines, he was convicted of rape in Rochester, New York. Following the conviction, investigators reportedly told him to leave the area, so he moved to Northern California, where his brother lived. In his journals, they indicate that he continued his assaults and he documented them in great detail. It's really creepy. You can look up his journals online and actually see the entries in his own handwriting. It's really unsettling to look at. In his diary, he documents over 100 victims. So what they call his rape diary reportedly contained entries dating back all the way to 1950 when he was only 16 years old. In 1962, he did marry Judith Naso, and they had 2 sons. By the 1970s, the family moved to that San Francisco Bay Area. Neighbors call him Crazy Joe. His wife divorced him in 1980 after discovering his disturbing behavior, which I'm sure she was clued into for a while. I mean, most wives are, but you put it in the back of your mind, you try to ignore it, and then it just escalates and gets to the point that it's so in your face you can't ignore it, right? So his behavior escalated, and Allegedly, he did drug his wife and arranged for a stranger to sexually assault her while he photographed it. Though he later convinced her that the incident didn't happen, the constant fighting and his controlling nature in the marriage led to the end, and she divorced him. So we did have 2 sons. One was named Charlie. And after his parents divorced, Charlie lived with his father for many years in Black Springs, Nevada. Charlie moved back in 2009, 2 years before his father's arrest. During his time living with his father, though, Charlie was exposed to his unsavory activities. According to a recent documentary, Charlie did tell investigators that Crazy Joe would take him to brothels in the Reno area. Charlie was also telling investigators that his father once took care of a prostitute who was causing trouble and claimed to have once seen his father dump a body in a river. Now, his claims were difficult for authorities to verify. He does have another son named David. After Crazy Joe was arrested, he did liquidate nearly $300,000 in assets, and he transferred that money to his son David. At the time, prosecutors in Marion County, California, indicated that David was living in the Philippines. For work, Crazy Joe was what you would call a freelance photographer. He was going door to door soliciting clients, but his photography often blurred into obsession. Joe would approach women, including sex workers, with offers to take their photographs. For some, this was a way to gain their compliance and lure them into his trap, often resulting in an assault or murder. He often took photos of women who appeared drugged, unconscious. Joe would often frequent clubs to charm or flirt with women to get them into his car. In one diary entry, he described overpowering a woman at her front door, writing, "I couldn't help myself." A summary of his crimes noted his penchant for women who wore nylons and heels. Joe was also a person of interest in Rochester, New York, because they too had what they called the alphabet murders, due to the victims' names having the same initials, which aligned with the pattern of some of his later victims out on the West Coast. When he was living in New York, there were young girls who were murdered and had double initials. They have not been able to prove that he is connected to these, but I will say it is a huge coincidence. And back then, they were calling those the alphabet murders. In addition to his diary entries describing individual sexual assaults and stalking, a wider rape diary detailed hundreds of sexual assaults across the country. When police searched his home, they found thousands of photos. He also collected items from some of these victims. After the disappearance of Sarah Dillon, who was born as Renee Shapira in 1992, investigators found her driver's license, her passport, and other personal items in his home in a safe deposit box. Prior to his arrest, he was caught shoplifting women's underwear. He was on probation for this offense when the evidence was discovered during a home visit by probation officers. It was in April of 2010 when he was on probation for shoplifting in Reno, Nevada. His home was searched and authorities discovered the rape diary. Of course, it had all of this information in it. Something I had mentioned before was the infamous list of 10. We're going to get into that in more detail. Those photographs, some of those women were bound, and as I said, they were drugged, they were lifeless, and later they confirmed a lot of them were dead. The mannequins around the home were posed in lingerie with ligatures around their necks, something out of a scary movie, but it was real. These discoveries unmasked a predator who had literally been hiding in plain sight. When I say that Joe's diaries chronicled his crimes, he literally chronicled things like calendar appointments. And some of the verbiage read like this, and this is verbatim. "Outside the front door, I overpowered her and ravished her." A circle star next to the name of a woman who later died. When questioned, he claimed that the word rape was used loosely, meaning making out. That's what he called it. He said rape was like making out. Numerous entries in the diary contained scrawled accounts of approaching women and offering them a ride. In the diary, prosecutors said that Joe would describe how he would put it to her. That was the rape. Put it to her. That's what he called it. And he often did this in his car, which he documented in those journals and diaries. The sites of the alleged attacks included every place from Cleveland, Ohio, to Kansas City, Missouri, to Buffalo, New York, Rochester, New York, Wichita, Kansas, Berkeley, California, and even London. I mean, the list is huge. This guy traveled a lot. The diaries aligned with his photo archives, the mannequins rehearsing violence, women captured unconscious or dead. Now, that list of 10 contained cryptic entries. It was on one sheet of paper. 4 matched known victims. Their names are Roxine Ragesh, RR, found strangled in 1977 near Fairfax. Then we have Carmen Colon, CC. Her decomposing body was discovered in 1978 along a scenic highway in California. Then you have Pamela Parsons, PP, waitress, murdered in 1993 in Yuba County. That is again in California, north of Sacramento. Then you have Tracy Tafoya, TT. She was drugged, raped, and strangled in 1994. Her body was left in Marysville Cemetery. There are 6 other entries that have remained unsolved, but there are a lot of links to missing persons that could align very well with his entries on that list of 10. So other confirmed victims, additional names emerged as the investigators dug deeper. There was Charlotte Cook in 1974. She was a 19-year-old who was murdered in January of that year. She was believed to be one of the earliest linked victims that they can find, predating his list of 10. There was Charlia Patton. I'm not sure how that first name is pronounced. In 1981, she was a 56-year-old woman whose body washed ashore. Joe managed the residence where she once lived and did photograph her. He was a suspect at the time, but charges would not come clearly for decades. Sarah Dillon, as I had mentioned her before, she was born Renee Shapiro, but she renamed herself after Bob Dylan's ex-wife and was last seen heading to a Bob Dylan concert in San Francisco. She disappeared in or near Nevada County, and Joe became the prime suspect. Each of these cases was later introduced in court to illustrate Joe's pattern, though not all resulted in charges. Beyond these confirmed victims, there are several that are assumed. One is the Sonoma County Jane Doe from 1983, a headless, decomposed woman found behind Simi Winery in Hillsburg. One of Joe's diary entries mentioned a girl in Hillsburg. DNA was extracted, but her identity remains unknown. Then there's that Rochester connection in New York. Joe grew up there, and investigators noted the early and eerie overlap of the Rochester alphabet murders of the 1970s. Both involved double initial victims. One of Joe's victims even shared a name, Carmen Colon, with a Rochester victim. So a huge coincidence. DNA evidence did rule him out in one case that they were trying to link him to in New York, but investigators still see the parallels as quite troubling, right? I mean, clearly. In 2013, Joseph was tried in Marin County representing himself. So we have another serial killer representing himself as his own lawyer. This is amazing how many times serial killers do this. Prosecutors presented his diaries, his photographs, the list of 10, the forensic evidence. They also introduced evidence connecting him to Patton and Dillon. In August of 2013, the jury convicted him of 4 murders. Rakesh Parsons in Tafoya. On November 22nd of 2013, Judge Andrew Sweet sentenced him to death, calling him evil and disturbed. At 79, he was the oldest man on California's death row. But California's death penalty has been suspended since 2006, ensuring Joe would live out his life behind bars. Here's where this story takes another twist, if you can believe it. At San Quentin, Joe befriended a fellow death row inmate named Bill Nagiro, who I had mentioned earlier. Bill convinced him that he had ties to the governor, who could arrange a prison transfer if Joe provided proof of his crimes. In 2019, Joe wrote out a confession for the girl from Berkeley, Lynn Ruth Cons. He described luring her through a modeling ad, choking her to death, and dumping her body from the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. Her disappearance had gone unsolved since 1974. The confession tied her to entry number 6 on his list of 10. Joe told Bill he had killed 26 women and that the list of 10 was only his greatest hit. So that was his highlight reel, okay? His top shelf, so to speak. Super disturbing. Inside his Reno home, when the investigators found all of the mannequins and the diaries and the journals and the list of 10, they also found 26 gold coins. How ironic. Possibly representing each victim. New names did emerge. Pamela Lamson, linked to the girl on Mount Tam, Charlotte Cook, possibly the girl from Miami, Rebecca Jean Dunn, a Las Vegas sex worker who appeared in one of his collages, photographs that he had put together in a collage because he was, an amateur photographer. Documentaries and investigators now point to a broader victim pool, Joe even showing signs of pride when another man was mistakenly linked to one of his crimes. Now, at 91, Joe is incarcerated at the California Healthcare Facility in Stockton, reserved for inmates with severe medical needs. He claims to be in poor health, wheelchair-bound, but Joe remains very manipulative. He tried to bargain with the FBI for reversal of his convictions in exchange for information on cold cases. He filed appeals claiming he was too naive to represent himself, but definitely not too naive to murder women, right? He even wrote to Kim Kardashian seeking compassionate release, spelling her name wrong too, which is super funny. And still he insists, and this is a quote, "Nobody's going to do anything. Maybe I'll get out tomorrow. Maybe I'll be released." So Joe lived a double life. He was a Marine. He was maybe Air Force. That remains to be seen. But we do know he was in the military. He was a father. He was a photographer. But he was a predator who stalked women for decades. His diaries and photographs documented a lifetime of stalking, assaults, and murders. Another really, and I know I keep saying this, but this case is so chilling. In his diaries, there are so many women that he just stalked and talked about obsessively, and thankfully never actually assaulted them. Now, that list of 10 remains one of the most chilling serial killer artifacts in history, but the truth may be far darker. From Charlotte Cook to Lynn Ruth Cons, from the Sonoma Jane Doe to possible Rochester victims, the tally may reach 26 or even more. He will likely die in prison, but the echoes of his crimes live on. The victims who were numbered but never named, the family still waiting for answers, and the haunting questions. Was the list of 10 the full story or just the beginning? Thank you very much for listening. I am Becca. And again, just as a reminder, if you do like this show, you've been listening, you've been watching, either or both, do like it, always follow, and hey, share it if you think somebody else will like it too.